A virus once thought to belong only to history had just re-entered the modern world. In 1952, during the Korean War, military doctors documented something they could not explain. Field medical reports led by Dr. James R. Caldwell, a U.S. Army medical officer stationed in mobile wartime hospitals, began recording a disturbing pattern. Soldiers were dying, but not from bullets, not from explosions, and not from any known infection at the time. It began with a sudden high fever, followed by severe headache, muscle breakdown, and extreme fatigue. Then the condition escalated rapidly: acute kidney failure, internal bleeding, and multi-organ collapse. Within hours, healthy soldiers were dying. Over 3,000 confirmed cases were recorded. And then, just as mysteriously as it appeared, it disappeared. No definitive cure was ever developed. No official public explanation was ever released, and the case was quietly archived in military medical records. For nearly 70 years, it remained silent until March 2026. In the remote port city of Ushuaia, Argentina, the southernmost city on Earth, a luxury expedition cruise began boarding passengers for a route across the South Atlantic and into Antarctic waters. On April 6, 2026, the vessel departed with 152 passengers and crew members representing 23 countries. At first, everything appeared routine. Passengers attended safety briefings. Photographs were taken on deck. The ship entered open ocean conditions without incident. But on April 11th, the first medical report was logged. A 70-year-old Dutch passenger presented with an abrupt onset of high fever, severe headache, and intense gastrointestinal distress. By the following day, his condition deteriorated into acute respiratory compromise, dehydration, and early signs of renal dysfunction. On April 13th, he was pronounced dead on board the vessel. At the time, it was recorded as an isolated medical emergency, but within 72 hours, the ship's medical team began documenting a second case, then a third. By April 28th, multiple passengers were showing identical progression patterns. What alarmed the medical staff most was not just the speed of decline, it was the pattern. Because every symptom sequence matched, line for line, the classified military case records from 1952. And when the ship's diagnostic samples were finally processed and transmitted to international health authorities on May 2nd, the result came back with a single confirmation: a virus, long believed to be contained within historical wartime records, had reappeared. The samples taken from the cruise ship were received and analyzed by multiple international laboratories under emergency protocol. Within hours, the first confirmation was escalated to the World Health Organization. The results were not consistent with influenza, nor with any known bacterial infection. Instead, genomic sequencing pointed toward a rare and highly dangerous viral family, Hantavirus, a virus first formally identified in the early 1980s, after retrospective links were made to wartime outbreaks dating back to 1952. But what made this case different was not just the identification, it was the strain. Preliminary classification suggested a genetic signature consistent with the Andes lineage, one of the few known variants with documented human-to-human transmission capability. By May 4th, WHO had initiated an emergency epidemiological assessment. Naval and maritime authorities were instructed to restrict docking permissions for the vessel. Multiple countries began refusing entry requests. The ship was effectively stranded at sea. On board, conditions were deteriorating. By May 6th, additional passengers began reporting symptoms consistent with early-stage infection. Medical isolation zones were established inside the vessel, but containment was already compromised. One question remained unanswered: how did a virus that disappeared from global attention for nearly 70 years suddenly reappear in a closed maritime environment in 2026? As of the latest reports, investigations are still ongoing. No final source of initial reactivation has been confirmed, and no complete transmission map has been officially released. But one fact is already clear. Pathogens that once seemed like historical records can still re-enter modern systems without warning. And when they do, the first signs are never loud. They start with something simple: a fever, a headache, a moment you ignore. If there is one takeaway from this case, it is not fear, it is awareness. Because in situations like this, early recognition is the only real defense, and if you found this story important, you might want to share it with others, not for panic, but so more people understand how quickly something invisible can escalate when no one is paying attention. Sometimes, the most dangerous stories in history are the ones people thought were already over.